Hi, good day, everyone. Today, for the Online Safety Summit for She the People, we have this really exciting panel that we're coming up with in terms of discussion of women's safety online. When we are to look at women's safety online, we need to understand that in today's hybrid world, the online world has pretty much invaded everyone's space. And therefore, it is to my great delight that I have three very strong leaders from three different fields who are working and would like to discuss this issue with all of us as we join in today. So I have with me Anjali Menon, who is a filmmaker. I have with me Yamini, who's an author and ideas editor for She the People. And then, of course, I have with me fellow lawyer as well as a BJP leader, Charu Pragya, who is here. So before we get on to asking all of these women about their experiences, sharing as to what their ideas might be as we take this discourse further. I think I'd like to start with a small summary of what are we facing in terms of online. My name is Talish Ray. I am a lawyer, and in my working in the field of law, I've realized that when we are looking at online safety, one of the first things that become problematic for people who are grappling with concepts of online is the fact that they grapple with how laws are applicable online. So that's one thing that everybody needs to remember, that laws that are applicable offline. So that is to say that if something is prohibited by law offline, it is also prohibited online. But beyond that, in terms of a legal infrastructure that we see in India, that as a mechanism has been problematic, but it has also been problematic because laws and lawmaking has been necessarily slow, whereas internet as a phenomena changes almost overnight. So we do have the IT Act, which talks about things like stalking or impersonation and other things. But unfortunately, by the time the mechanism comes in, or the Indian Penal Code, by the time the mechanism takes place, it has already caused the damage, because the damage happens very real time. And as we see in terms of the online space has not always only been about looking at safeguards for safety. Where women are concerned, the online space is one which, when explored by them, has changed political discourse. If anybody who wants to look at the target of how political discourse was changed would like to possibly go back to 2012, where we had the Jyoti Singh Pandey case, and there was a hashtag and a lot of public uproar that was driven through social media. Then again, you had hashtag Me Too that came up around the world and then took over also in India. We've also seen that in terms of social commerce, a lot of women have come online, joined up platforms, and taken things forward. So you have women entrepreneurs that have come out from the electronic space. We have the very celebrated story of Naika at the moment, which has been which talks about this sort of a phenomena. Then we also see that women have been very easily been able to manage their impersonal social equity through social media. But at the same time, right now, the need of the hour is to discuss about what are the boundaries. So in terms of taking that forward, I'd really like to hear from all of us panelists here. In terms of, I'll probably give it over to Yamini first. Yamini, I just want to understand from you, because you are an ideas editor, you're also an author, you're also a public figure. What is the kind of social media hate that comes your way, and how does it impact you? And after Yamini, I'd really like it if Anjali, you can take this forward, and then Charu, if you could pitch in as well.
Thank you, Talish. So, the social media hate that I usually face is mostly gender driven. Since I work from a women centric platform, we raise subjects, we present opinions that do not go down well with a lot of people. And it's not just about female centric gaze at regressive practices, it's even something as trivial as an opinion on a movie trailer, or maybe a rehash of a film, or an opinion on a film that was released 30 years ago. For instance, the latest um, hatred in commentary that I received was for writing a piece on a film that released 30 years ago called Sajan. And I wrote that instead of ending up with any of the men in the film, the movie's lead female actor should have rather taken a solo trip to Goa. And in the comment section, I was told that, that's what you will end up doing in 10 years because no man would like to have you. There were a lot of comments about how I looked, or what future had for me, being not ugly was the word that was used, being body shamed, uh, look at the way you look and how can you write such things, and this is what you write, and you kind of always portray men in the bad light. So these are the normal kind of comments that we get. I wouldn't say they are disturbing to an end, because there's a mental barrier that you have to erect for yourself when you are in the public space and you are constantly going back and forth on the internet. But yes, they do bother you, because in certain ways it makes you standing up for yourself and your other colleagues very difficult. When you have to see someone who is younger than you also in the public space being pulled for their views, it's harder, because as women, we have that hesitancy to not jump into other people's lives. You feel that, it's not my, should I protect her? Should I step in for her? But then the hate would come for me. What if they find a way to my child on the internet? What if they start going aggressively behind me or towards other relatives of mine, other women in my life? Do they deserve that? Do I deserve that? Does the woman working with me deserve that? None of us deserve that, but it still comes our way, and we have to deal with it. We have to find a way to live with it. The best way to deal with this is to build a mental barrier for it. There's no other way, sadly, in the space that we work, to go about it. Otherwise you will just have to stop work altogether.
Right. Thank you, Yamini, for sharing that. So, Anjali, coming back to you, Yamini talks about how she's built that mental barrier, and I think that's true for a lot of us. How about you? What is the sort of impact that the hate that you face personally or see around you that has on you, and what is it that you've done to be able to navigate that space?
Frankly, my entire tryst with social media has been with relation to my career. And right from, I think, 2009, I have been actively part of different social media platforms. And much of this was related to what I was doing, things I would be excited to share with the audience. It was a wonderful space where one could connect directly with the audience, and that made a lot of difference because you get excellent feedback. You get, it's like a live thing. You've never had that opportunity, and having that was really meaningful. But very soon one could see that there were no rules, and I figured that this I will have to restrict this to keep it in a professional space rather than allow it to go into a personal space. I see a lot of my colleagues, a lot of friends who do, prefer to wear their hearts on their sleeve, and they would like to be comfortable personally and professionally in the social media space. I've chosen not to do that simply because I do not think there is the kind of safe, comfortable environment for me to be able to do that. I think there is a sort of self censorship which very easily comes into our comments, into our expression of what we think is right. People are very often fine as long as you're sharing pictures of yourself or your films or your actors, and putting up sort of innocent trivia. It's all fine, but the minute your opinion turns political, or your opinion, has diverse interpretations, then that's when you actually get the wave of response. And that is quite concerning when it crosses certain limits of being simply civil. And I've been fortunate because I think also because I've been uh, you know not very reliant on social media. I think my last post must have been some 2 months ago. I'm not terribly, driven to post every day or to talk about my life or to talk about every little thing that I do. But, for a lot of people, they are. And I think everyone deserves an atmosphere of respect. And for us to be reminded that this space is something that can achieve a lot minus this negativity. It has right now been reduced to some kind of a public toilet mentality where what they used to do on those walls, today they do it on the social media walls. And that has been extremely disturbing. I have witnessed some friends of mine who've had to go through traumatic experiences, who've had to go through, really personal experiences of trauma, which have come entirely from social media, and helping them get through it. I've myself had to go through imposters claiming to be you and really leading people into trouble, claiming to be you. And to fight all of that, it's like you have to be this 10-armed person to really deal with it, even if you're personally not on the platform. So that is it's calling for a lot of action from our side without us even sort of initiating it. So yes, I think it's one of the challenges of our time, and we just have to deal with it as it comes.
So thank you, Anjali, because what I heard from Yamini was about a mental barrier, but what I'm hearing from you is also about a sort of censorship, because in terms and moments where you may have been driven to talk about certain things, which would be your stances on, or maybe even a very generic thing. So, Charu, I'd like to actually come in to you because you are in the public space. You are, you are unashamedly yourself. You're one of the few young women leaders that we have who goes out on social media platforms and stands up for what are your political as well as personal convictions. So how is it that you have dealt with it, and what do you go through when you sort of face it in terms of either for yourself or for other people that are there in the public space?
So, Talish, I have been very much in agreement with what both our co-panelists have been saying, Yamini and Anjali. And I agree with both of them in the sense that, yes, there has to be some sort of a mental barrier that we need to keep in place. And if when we are not able to manage that, it's all right to take a step back and take a break even from social media, because dealing with it on a day-to-day basis can get toxic. And I'm going to bring in gender here. What happens is, if you look at social media profiles for any women, not just me in politics, but anyone, the dynamics run like this. Approximately 95 to 97% of your followers are going to be men, and a very few of your followers are going to be women, and that exists across platforms. It's not just Twitter, which I use most. It's also on Facebook and on Instagram. So when there is that level of disparity, when the gender imbalance digitally is so wide, you do have to deal with a lot of rubbish, if I can call it that, online. And when Yamini was talking about her piece on the movie Sajan, I also was thinking about the movie Queen, which came out a decade ago nearly. And this ending of Queen was what made it popular with a lot of women, because the heroine of that movie walked off into the sunset alone, without a partner. And it was empowering, and I think that was one of the reasons why I like that movie so much, because I think women have to stand up for themselves instead of putting up with all the crap that keeps coming her way from all sections. But there's this issue of anonymity on social media which exists, and that makes it easier for trollers to spill and spew hate across platforms. So if we can have a system in place, if legally we can advocate for a law which says that please say what you want on social media, that whole dialogue about free speech is welcome. But if that free speech can actually be honest as well, if that free speech can come from your own mouth instead of hiding behind an anonymous identity on social media, because that makes it very easy. And I think we will be cutting down hate speech by half, at least, if not more, if we just have that simple rule that to register on any social media platform, you have to reveal your true identity. If a criminal case is coming out of any dialogue that you have with someone online, can be pinned on one person without a lot of running around and hassle and cyber cells being involved, because the cyberspace evolves a lot more faster than our physical space does. Our law enforcing agencies are not always caught up the way a hacker or someone who uses social media effectively could be, and that's normal. I think that's the case all over the world. And this subtle sexism exists. It exists all across our professions. It exists online. Sometimes you mind it, sometimes you choose to let it go, but every time you choose to let it go, it comes back to you manyfold. It comes back to you many like you manyfold. So these two things are important to me. And Yamini, I think Anjali said that sometimes you have to think about whether you want to leap into an argument which is going on and become a part of it, because when you do that, you're also exposing yourself to a lot of hate that will come your way. And most women choose to not do it, because dealing with this hate becomes traumatic. I've become better with with time, but I remember the first few times I was trolled, I would actually sit and cry. And I would feel weak afterwards. I would think that what is wrong with me? Why am I letting it get to me? I don't even know those people. And for every 5 people spewing hate and venom today, there will be 5 who will be kind to you as well. But the bad stuff gets to you before the good stuff does. So we have to stand up for each other. And maybe if we can all start talking about getting rid of anonymity on social media, it'll be a big help.
Thanks a lot, Charu. Actually, yeah, that's pretty practical in terms of when we look at getting rid of anonymity. But what I do also hear, and what actually pains me, because all of you, as people in their own spaces, are talking about in terms of what is a mechanism that has been evolved by women, and what it pains me as a lawyer, as somebody who works in women's rights, is that why should those mechanisms be our responsibility? Why should somebody like a Yamini have a social barrier? Why would I not get to know maybe the fact that Anjali may on some day want to put up something that deeply affects her, which may not be related to her profession? Or the fact that at some point in time, Charu, you have sort of looked at something and said that the good part will come later. Let me just, sort of deal with it. And this is what I have to do in terms of, the chilling effect, as it's called, right? So what I hear from all you ladies is the fact that we've all gone through some sort of chilling effect in our lives. I know, I mean, I barely get on social media platforms outside of very privacy secure ones. And that's where I would actually like to move in terms of understanding from you, Anjali, because you see, you are from a field which shapes popular imagination. And in that popular imagination, you have a sort of popular culture that sort of develops out of films and TV and other media that has come in, which is sort of even more during the pandemic than ever, because now that you look at it, there are people who are consuming audiovisual media like never before. So how do you think that the popular culture has been able to shape in some way the positives or the negatives of online safety? And has that debate really taken a bit towards the worst when the way women are treated in cinema in India?
It's important for us to recognize that at the bottom of all this lies a certain culture, and whatever is happening around us and whatever is playing out is actually representative of that. Possibly much more so online, because it's in its most intense form. It's delivered, hot right from the oven, and people have the shroud of anonymity, and they can go scot-free. So how does someone behave when there are no rules is actually, much more revelatory of who they are than anything else. So when you talk about, all these truisms of, a country is represented by how it respects its women and all of that, I think it's not just the online space. We have many issues to resolve all over. The great manifesto of change which is written is quite far from reality. We are aware of that. We have an Nirbhaya fund which sits there, 89% of it is unutilized. And like you said, in 2012, when the incident with Jyoti Singh Pandey happened, that was one of those times when really it worked to the benefit. It really mobilized crowds, it brought people together, it supported and supplemented the protest which was happening on the streets. And that is what I would hope for. That for me is the best sense of using the online space for something that all of us believe in. But on a regular day, that is not what is happening. On a regular day, we have not just, it's not even just about gender. There is a very important part that gender plays, but anyone with a slightly diverse opinion is actually very prone to being trolled, very prone to being shut down, very prone to being attacked. And why this whole thing, the debate around tolerance, actually is very important here. When we are of a certain gender, yes, we are having to face it much more, but that, I think, a big part of that should also be attributed to the fact that as women, I think most women do not open their mouths and say what they feel. Most women do not stand up for somebody else who's being attacked. to the extent I have noticed, Charu was just mentioning how the followers are a lot male, and I was just reminded of my statistics. My insights say that it's about 40% women and 60% men in my case, which is wonderful. But when it comes to a post, okay, which I might have put out, which sort of resonates with a lot of women, I find the number of shares on that post will be incredibly high, but it will be shared as my opinion without even qualifying it with a single word from them. It will not be that they say, okay, this is what I think about this. No. Whereas when things are shared by men, they will qualify it with their opinion and write what they feel. And I find this pattern very interesting. That why is it that women are not more forthcoming with their opinions? And possibly it has to do with the same self-censorship that I was speaking of. Because when a woman is posting, she's so mindful of what everybody under the sun thinks that her own opinion is somewhere, sort of submerged under all of that. And the only thing is that, yes, I agree with what is being said. I want to share this. I want people to know this. And therefore, in that excitement, I will share it, but I will, stay away from saying anything so that I don't get into more trouble. And this is a very clear, apparent pattern. And it's so sad that it exists. I would like for all of us to be able to just say our piece, just say exactly what we feel. I mean, every single post, the amount of time it takes to draft it so that it's nuanced enough and it says exactly what I feel, and it's not just black or white, or it's that tone of gray that I want it to be, because that's the nuanced narrative is really lost. There is no space for it. The minute you say something, there will be a whole bunch who you're actually standing by who are attacking you. And there will be, others who, again, who are not agreeing with what you have, then also coming, after you. And after a point, you really wonder, should I really just get down and do the work? Or should I spend time on social media trying to solve this and resolve this? And my tendency is to just go off media, because I don't really think I want to fight masks. I don't think I want to, waste my energy on that. Why would I? When I see that it does not lead to change, when I see that people just even sometimes put up comments and they just literally sign out. It doesn't matter to them once they're off screen. So then what am I engaging with? Who am I engaging with? With temporary, spasmodic reactions from people? It doesn't really excite me. I'd much rather work with, people like yourself to try and bring about real change. And this is, I've been speaking so far about myself, but I'm part of a Women in Cinema collective, which is representing women in film. And we have taken some very strong stands against what is the popular norm. We work in a rather male-dominated environment, and as a result, we've had to raise quite a few issues which require attention. And as and when we have done that, the level of hate that has come to us is incredible. I mean, I had to learn a whole new vocabulary.
Can I for a moment just interrupt you, because I'm glad you brought in the Women in Cinema Collective. One of the things I love about Women in Cinema Collective is the way their social media is handled. I agree about the hate, but I also love the nuance and the layers in terms of messaging and sort of giving other women within the field a shout out, because it's one of those rare spaces where there are so many diverse women from a spectrum of profession, and they're all sort of, but every time I look at a message which comes out either in support or about certain issues, there's a great amount of detailing, because as a lawyer and a feminist, sometimes I look at it and say, oh my god, wow, I did not even think that this needed detailing, and then I get very aghast at the kind of hate, because it's a very clear message there. So how does it work for you as a collective of women there?
It's a beautiful process that we have for our social media, because every post which goes out has to actually be endorsed by the founders of the collective, which right now we work with a group of people who generate the post. One or two people will generate the post, and then it's actually circulated, and everybody adds their little bit to it. And in the process, what happens is it often gets more and more refined. And sometimes people point out that some particular thing may not be clear, so let's get that clear. And because we want to address a broad-based audience, it is important. So initially, what started off as small posts started off getting longer, started off getting to be in Malayalam and in English, and it was important for all of these things to evolve over time. And I think we also kind of in a way started to deal with the hate a lot better. Earlier, we would all take it very personally, and we have a whole crazy long list of banned words, which is why you see some sanity in the comments. But that list just keeps getting better, bigger, and it's extremely disturbing if you actually look at the statistics and if you look at the kind of feedback that one gets. We have Sangeeta Janachandran who handles our social media, and it's for her. I think she deals with a lot of social media for different entities, but this is the most challenging job because this is one place you have a lot of vocal women putting out very strong opinions, and all of the hate comes right back to this one portal. So it's an incredibly challenging job, but I think somewhere we've maybe gotten used to it and we've kept dealing with it, kept dealing with it. So we're just staying consistent to what we want to say, and we're putting it out across in the most honorable and polite way that we know, but not taking nonsense. So
More power to all of you in terms of putting out spaces like that and in terms of having vocal women. Yami, I would actually like to come to you and understand from you that you're working in a channel which specifically, I mean, it says She the People, which is an acknowledgement of the fact that we are people in the first place. But more importantly, as an ideas editor, where do you think, what is the responsibility that media in general has towards women and safety of women in terms of the online space? Because we are seeing a media space where it has become fairly rampant to call women names. And I'm not just talking about online media, I'm also talking about, to me, it's also audio visual that is streaming through something. You look at the language that is being used. So where do you think that is likely to come in, whether it's in advertisement, which is fairly self-regulated, or instant news that's coming in, news channels that are there, YouTube channels? What is your sense of the need in there for self-regulation and market dynamics?
Um, See, one of the first things I would want to say is that media is a reflection of what is happening on social media. The news has become more social media driven in the times that we live in. Uh, and when you look at that from that perspective, you realize that news organizations have stopped listening. Everybody wants to talk, nobody wants to listen what another person has to say. We have moved from holding constructive conversations around issues and just voicing our opinions in the loudest ways possible. That needs to stop. Media needs to scale back and realize that it's a platform to showcase voices of people, showcase opinion, showcase truth in its barest forms, and not use a tinted gaze towards it, not use their voice, their loud voice, to manipulate it or color it in a certain way. Like people on media, news organizations have also created a sort of echo chamber around themselves where the same kind of voices bounce back and forth, and it creates a rift between viewers themselves who are consuming the views. The minute you click on post from a certain kind of news organization, the next second your feed will be full of news from the kind of organization that you have selected. It's either one sided or the other sided. It's never central. You don't hear opinions from different kinds, different perspectives. It's just used to, it's like, putting yourself on an intersection and choosing one way, and once you make that turn left or right, you're on that way. There's no coming back from you. Media needs to realize that what we are doing is not bringing people together. We are pulling them apart. Even with She the People, we are a women-centric organization, but we have it's a personal agenda for me as well that we never badmouth men. We realize to go beyond the agenda of male bashing and understand that there's a structure in place, and that structure of patriarchy kind of victimizes men as well. We are all victims of patriarchy here. We need to understand that. We need to understand the impact of certain stigmas and stereotypes has on all the genders and all the sexualities, and then we take it forward. and then move ahead. It's important for us to feature voices of men. It's important for us to also talk about men's rights, also talk about sexual abuse that men don't get to talk about. It's also important for us to talk about how men are impacted, because if we don't do that, it is impossible to have a wholesome conversation which kind of gives a person a chance to think from all perspectives and then have a view. So media needs to stop feeding new views to people, their opinions to people, and instead encourage them to question more.
Thanks
Talish,
for that.
you're on.
Yeah, so thanks for that, Yamini. Actually, the need that is there in terms of understanding patriarchy and for the media to be able to focus on people. But I'd actually like to, from there, take it up with you, Charu, because I do hear from all of you in terms of the fact that social media space, online space is a reflection of the culture that is there, that therefore women have sort of put themselves, we've all acknowledged it, and yes, that is the reality. But Charu, I'd like to understand from you in terms of what is your view, because if it was only about a cultural reality, then let's admit that when sati was banned in India, it was a cultural reality, and that did not stop leaders from taking up the cause, inconsequential of what political party or political setup one comes in. The wrong always remains wrong. Bullying is always wrong. Trolling has always been wrong. To be able to oppress a particular person based on their gender will always be wrong. To issue out, rape threat to a cricketer's 8-month, 10-month-old daughter will always be wrong, whether in the real world or in the online world. So, what is it that you think can be done to make the political system accountable and to be able to hear that this is getting to be a fairly serious issue? This is an issue that is taking women away from this wonderful online world. There has been a lashback. How do we make our political system accountable for it as the representative of all of us?
So, Talish, this is my view, and I'm not speaking for my organization now. I'm only speaking for myself. Our political world has become very, very exclusive. It's become a very either or kind of a situation. We're not happy with the intersectionality. We're not happy with overlapping opinions where we all agree with something or we all disagree with something. And unfortunately, political ideology is now such that if I am right, even if the left does something which is all right, I'm not supposed to agree with it. Or if I have done something which is universally correct, the left has to take a stand against it. And that scenario is really bad for our country to move ahead. That scenario is really bad, and it is against what we all stand for as leaders in society in whatever professions we are in. And this is irrespective of gender. So this has to go away, because when I stand up for women's rights, it doesn't mean that I'm standing against men's rights. And that's the perception that is created on social media. If I were to say, I like apples, they will say, you don't like oranges, you are discriminating against the bananas, grapes are offended. So this entire discourse which exists politically, and it is reflected in social media, needs to be done away with. Political leaders have to be comfortable in calling out things that are wrong. For example, if there is a crime against a woman that is committed, you have to stand against it, irrespective of who's committed that crime and what your political ideology is. When something right is being done for the country, you have to stand with the country. It doesn't matter whether you're in government or opposition. And we seem to be losing this. And that bothers me, because I think the political system has to accept this to be able to evolve in a better way, to be able to also attract more and more youngsters who are educated, who come from diverse backgrounds into policy making. That's the only thing that's going to change our system, because I'm very vocal about this. We all sit at home, we all have our opinions, but we will be able to see a positive change only when we join a system to bring about that change. Okay, it might not be directly in governance, but it can be indirectly working with society in one way or the other. Another thing is some laws and regulations in place. Australia, very recently, I'm using the example of Australia because very recently Australia has put in laws in place against trolling. They have been very strict. They have decided who is going to be liable. It's either Facebook or Twitter. If somebody anonymously is indulging in hate speech, that person is going to be, that organization, that social media platform is going to be pulled up. So legislatively also we have to be firmer, stronger. We have to stop thinking about how that social media platform is helping us in making our lives easier. We have to deal with the dark side as well. It's very easy to sweep bigger issues under the carpet. We should stop doing that.
Thanks, Charu, for actually shedding some light on that. So very quickly, when we wrap up, I'll go first here, and then I'd like to hear from all of you in terms of a proof of concept model which resists this normalization. So mine is has always been about educating people. I think it's time that we educated that violence in a system or framework which is unregulated is not all right. And I'm not a great one for actually looking at penal punishments, because I believe that after a point in time, if one knows what is the right thing to do, one is likely to follow that. So that's my proof of concept, along with intermediary liabilities that Charu spoke about. But I'm going to throw this open to all three of you to ask you what, according to you, would be the one small step, as well as the second in terms of a larger structural step that you see can be taken to ensure that women don't have to look at the online space as something that is unsafe or where they need to restrict their voices. So, Anjali, would you like to go first?
Sure. I see. I agree completely with what Charu said in terms of getting the social media platforms accountable for what is going on, because this is a space that they have created more than anyone. We all know that they are the ones who benefit from it. And in that situation, that accountability has to be pinned. They have to put in, proper procedures for addressing these things, and they cannot get away with saying that our rules are going till this point and no further, and that now we can't do anything to help you. That is just not done. This is the place that they're bringing countries, people together, and they just have to be accountable for it. Legally, there should be legislations that pin that accountability and make them responsible, and to work towards solutions for this. Secondly, I think the most important thing here when it comes to a gender differentiated experience on social media is to empower women's voices. Just to give you an example, at the WCC, we have actually had two very active digital campaigns against online abuse. The first one was actually in cooperation with She the People, and it went beautifully. But there we were talking about people who had opinions about these things, generating awareness. We're talking about all of that. There was a quite a bit of success with that. But the second time we went in for a campaign, we adopted a slightly different approach, which actually evolved very organically. We had one person who made a video about what she felt and sent it to us. And then we had another person who made a video. And before you knew it, we were receiving videos from all across the place, and all women speaking and being so articulate about reclaiming this space and refusing to take nonsense for it. And that was such a motivating factor for a lot of them who didn't maybe make a video and post it, but they felt like I can actually come out and say this. And that was fabulous. It was really energizing. And I think by the end of the campaign, we had actually men also sending in the videos and speaking up for gender neutrality in this space, speaking up for reclaiming this as a cultured space, saying that this is not my culture. I want people to feel safe and feel comfortable and have conversations here and not abuse. So that was really wonderful and empowering for all of us. I think that really needs to happen at a much larger scale. That we have
I
to
think yes.
encourage
I think
people to actually come out and say things. So
I
that
think
would be
yes. I
my
think that
biggest thing.
I'd love to hear about other women, as somebody who's sort of withdrawn from this online space only because of that. I'd just love to hear about experiences like that. So thank you so much, Anjali, for sharing. Yamini, would you like to give us what you think would be your proof of concept for
Thanks, Talish. So I agree with what you said in the beginning that there's a need for immediate need for educating people about social media. I would like to take that a step forward and say that we need to educate younger people first who are still in their school and colleges. We need to make education about correct social media etiquette a part of the curriculum. If we can talk about sex, if we can talk about finances to our children, why can't we talk about social media to them? Why cannot we educate them when it's a day part of their daily life these days? They're on Instagram, they're there on Twitter, they're there on Facebook. If it's so integrated to their existence now, we need to make them understand the repercussions of not knowing what is correct and what is incorrect in the social media space. As Anjali also pointed out, we need to amplify voices of women more and more. But then again, we need to also encourage um, positive voices more. It doesn't matter who they come from. If someone is saying the right thing, if someone is saying something that promotes peace and harmony instead of promoting hatred, that kind of voice needs to be amplified. But sadly, what happens is hate gets more space in news and media than positivity and love ever gets. It calls for a change in our mindset. It calls for a change at how we look at mental health as well, and our overall perspective toward what riles us up and what motivates us to speak out. We react more and impulsively towards hate, but we don't react as enthusiastically towards positivity and love and harmony. I guess if we change that, it could bring a much larger overall change in how we approach social
Totally agree.
Yeah. Thanks on that. Charu, I know you've already given us the structural changes in terms of the new legal spaces, in terms of intermediary liability. But one small, very quick input, what would you like young women who are watching you, who are in the political space or aspire to get into the political space? What is their one word, one bit of advice that you would give them to be able to bring about this change?
So, if you want to bring about a change for women, please be a voice for them. I realized listening to Anjali speak that there are far more women probably in her line of work than in mine. Because if you compare it to the kind of gender disparity in our followers itself, it just shows how many women are actually there in the public political space. But we have. Slogans which say "Beti bachao, beti padhao." Maybe we should add to it and say "Beti bachao, beti padhao, beto ko bhi samjhao." That is very important, and those kind of narratives have to be built up from our homes when we have little babies in our arms, when our children go off to school. A lot of education in Indian schools traditionally is still imparted by sending the girls off to another classroom and keeping the boys in another space, whether it is sex education or about menstrual health. All this should be done together, so men learn to understand and respect women, and they don't remain something that exists maybe on porn sites, or women which can be objectified because they have not really understood the emotional and the human aspect of their living. So that inclusive education has to become a must, and we have to start working on it, not just in bigger cities where we've been privileged. We've lived in metro cities, and we've been to schools where inclusiveness did not just include gender inclusiveness, it was everything. But we have to go down to rural India, and this thought has to be in everybody's mind, that when you speak to your girls and tell them to be careful about things, please speak to your boys as well.
Thank you, Charu. And with that, I mean, I'm also very conscious of the fact that we are sort of running over our time. But so if I can sort of sum this up, I think hearing from all of you from your spaces, one, it's empowering for someone like me to realize that I'm not alone in this, and I think that's what a lot of us women are looking at, because when we sometimes look at our narratives, we tend to think our narratives tend to be so shrouded that we don't understand that the others are going through it. So thank you so much, Yamini, Anjali, Charu, for sparing your time for this and discussing this candidly across from your spectrums as well as the work that you do. And I think I'm going to sign out here with a bit of a wish. I wish that by the time I'm slightly older, maybe another 10 years from now or 5 years from now, in fact, I can be ambitious another 2 years from now, I wish we didn't have to discuss online safety for women on a space. I just wish we come to a world where our girls and women and elders don't have to think about, yes, don't have to think about this being a topic at all. This becomes irrelevant and this just sort of passes over with the pushback. But I think that's also optimism speaking at my end. But more power to all of you ladies. Thank you so much for being here. And
Thank you
with
very
that,
much.
that's a sign out from us. Thank you.
Thank you very
Thank
much.